Do you remember him swimming? Did he ever swim after that?
No, I never ever remember him swimming. And it's funny you say that. We would go to my grandparents' house on the creek on Long Island, and there was a pool at my cousin's house, and everybody was always in the pool. It was the place where we'd go for summers on
Right.
the creek with a swimming pool, and never ever there or anywhere else did I see him with shorts on or go swimming ever.
Wow. Welcome back, everybody, to the 1 hour podcast where all good stories could be told in under 60 minutes. And I'm going to do everything I can to keep that promise to you today. We're going to be interviewing Roger Still, who is the grandson and great-nephew of the Dunn Brothers, two survivors of the 1916 shark attacks on the Jersey Shore. Before we get there, I just want to thank you for all the really positive reactions to the first episode of the podcast. People were really enthralled with the Olympic story in Berlin, 1936. But what are we doing today, kids? Shark attacks. That fear in the subconscious, beyond snakes, beyond the bear in the woods, or the lion, the shark, you don't see. But you know it's out there, it's lurking, and nothing brought the fear and hysteria of shark attacks like Peter Benchley's novel Jaws, and then Spielberg's movie Jaws right after that. Obviously, great novel, bestseller, but few people know that this wasn't just a fictional story, that the concept of this story actually came from a real-life event over about a 2-week period at the Jersey Shore in 1916, when sharks were misunderstood and swimming not overly prevalent about something that people would regularly do. It was just kind of first being discovered. Beach going and going into the ocean. Those were foreign things. Those were kept to shipmen and navymen and fishermen. So much about the ocean was misunderstood. So much about aquatic life misunderstood. And this is one of those, maybe the first real event on American soil that brought us up front with the predators that lurk in the ocean. And it was right on the Jersey Shore. What happened? How did it happen? Why did it happen? Well, first we got to understand the culture of 1916 before we even jump into the story and meet our guest. Jersey Shore is beachfront property that's facing the Atlantic Ocean that extends about 120 miles. Cape May sort of becomes really our first Jersey Shore tourist attraction. But then a little more of the high class to-do society starts flocking to Long Branch, Atlantic City, and before long, Asbury Park, and then Belmar, and all of the other sites that, if you're from the area, you are well familiar with, start becoming regular tourism visits for people from New York and Boston, and to the south, Philadelphia and Baltimore. New Jersey's kind of that gateway between those cities. It's right in the middle. And with track lines being put, it becomes a destination that's feasible. Get on the train, take a ride for a few hours, and we're going to drop you off near beachfront. And with that, you had restaurants, you had candy shops, you had taverns, you had fancy hotels. There were certain guidelines and etiquette of how you handled yourself at the shore. When you're on the boardwalk, it's kind of considered a promenade to dress in your best, even though on these 80, 90 degree days, and you'd walk on the boardwalk and you'd enjoy the breeze and you'd dance. Music was becoming a big attraction on the boardwalks of Jersey Shore. And then there were those that would venture to the beach, and you would do it, I want to say uniform, but you would go in your sea trunks, which would certainly for women cover a majority of their body. And for men, there was, kind of a norm of stipulations, and you were not to be caught with your bathing suit on the boardwalk. That was a no-no. There was bathhouses and changing stations. So it's not like today when you're walking around the Jersey Shore or any of these shore towns on the East Coast, and people are kind of just stumbling back and forth between the boardwalk and who's got shoes on and who doesn't have a shirt on. That was not the standard. You were either dressed to impress on the boardwalk, or you were in your bathing suit, I guess. But many people didn't really swim. They came for the breeze. They came for the beach. They came to relax. They hid under their umbrellas. And then there were sections with ropes attached to poles where you would go and for you to hang on. And swimming, I guess, isn't maybe the best word I'd put it. Splashing, jumping around. Women were, from what I'm gathering, not encouraged to really learn how to swim. The men were, and it was kind of gentlemanly. They, women should not be in there without holding the rope or next to the arm of a man who, could help you. And that was really at the turn of the century. This was a novelty. People were still new to this. People were still coming to see this beachfront and go into the ocean, which that was for mariner life. That was for fishermen. That was for sea life. While it might look different, the concept is the same as modern today. Have nothing to do. We have to spend a couple days down at the shore. It's a family event. We have a lot of fun. It was affordable. It usually wasn't permanent. It was a 90-minute to 2-hour ride to Philadelphia or New York from either way. So you could go for the day, come back, or you could spend the night in a hotel. These are people coming from, the city who aren't used to the creeks and the bays that you might find a little more in the rural areas of the suburbs. So we're in the middle of World War I. And there's really a push for peace without victory, without fully engaging our American troops and getting involved in the war. And that's really led by Woodrow Wilson, who's a New Jersey governor, who is not the first president of the United States to have a connection to the Jersey Shore. At least 6 to 7 presidents prior to him had visited the Jersey Shore. People at the time are being introduced to leisurely life. Didn't really exist kind of before this generation. So, what did we know about sharks? Very little. Very little. Mostly all of the scientific facts that we knew, or at least we thought we knew, were incorrect. They'd obviously been spotted by sailors and fishermen. Most people didn't even know what a shark looked like. There were reports that sharks had their mouths on the side of their bodies. Sharks in the North Atlantic, no, those are tropical. And there was a disagreement over, could a shark even hurt you? Prominent scientists were putting out that, and here comes the title of the book, but sharks' jaws couldn't snap down. They couldn't snap your bones. They wouldn't harm you. And even if they saw you, they pay no mind to you. They're not interested in you. We know that's not true. There were some records of attacks, but a lot of them were unfounded. Most of them, I heard it from a sailor. Never could find the sailor. Never knew who the sailor. So were they tales from sea? Probably. Or the attacks that happened outside of the Americas were essentially in tropical areas or outside of factories where meat and blood and water were circulating in the area, and a shark happened to come and mistook a human for a fish or part of the flesh of the bloody water and snapped at it and then realized it wasn't interested in it. So that was what was considered a shark attack. And because of that, Ocean Grove, Allenhurst, Deal, Elberon, it became a destination. It became an affordable destination. And a lot of people went there. Babe Ruth, Buffalo Bill Cody, some famous actresses, James Garfield, U.S. Grant, bought houses there, lived down there. And then July 1st, 1916, everything changes. What happens? It becomes the first day of the next 12 days of sheer terror on the Jersey Shore. I'll give you the short history before we get to our guest. July 1st, Charles Van Sant. He's 24. He's a stockbroker. He's from Philadelphia. He gets off the rail at Beach Haven. Father, mother, sister. It's a summer heat waves. On record, it's one of the hottest summers maybe ever recorded at the time. Part of society tradition at the time was the men would go for a swim on the beach before supper. So he goes with his dog and he takes his swim before dinner. While he's out there, his dog comes out of the water. Dog's afraid. Dog's not interested. And I guess witnesses are saying that he's kind of shouting to the dog, trying to say, hey, get over here. And he's about 50 yards off the shore. So he's close enough you could see him, but you can't really exactly hear what he's saying. And apparently the dog is on the shoreline and the dog doesn't want to go in. So the first shark attack in the movie Jaws, the first one on the beach in front of everyone, not the Chrissy Watkins attack, which is the opener, where the young boy is killed on the raft. There's a guy with his dog, and all of a sudden the dog disappears. And did Jaws eat the dog, or did the dog run away? We'll leave you to the Facebook page to debate that. But apparently he starts shouting, and initially people think he's shouting at the dog, who's cowering and wants nothing to do with going back in the water. And then they realize he's probably shouting for something else, and he might be in a little bit of panic. But I don't think, according to the research, people are really paying much attention to him. And by the way, where's that research coming from? A lot of it's coming from this book, 12 Days of Terror. Richard Fernicola, he's a medical doctor who wrote this book. Pick this up if you're interested in this topic. This was a great read. I killed it in a weekend. No pun intended. So, he's 50 yards out, and all of a sudden people on the beach start screaming, saying, there's a fin in the water. And they're trying to warn him. And whether he hears their warning or not, no one knows. Because then he's attacked. This is our first public shark attack in the history of the United States. Now, there were other people who said they saw things in India, saw things in the tropics, witnessed by sailors, witnessed by, one or two people. But this is on a beach full front of onlookers who are watching this man get attacked by a shark. The lifeguard is named Alexander Ott, and he's actually Charles Van Sant's buddy. They're friends. And the concept of a shark attack is absolutely foreign to him because it had never really happened before. This is the first attack in public. So he dives in to get his friend and drags him out and is just blown away by the blood that's coming out of his legs. Some reports are saying that there's a shark that's still attached to his thigh. Whether that's true or not, we're not sure. Ott pulls out his buddy. He sees his right leg and his thigh. He's in trouble. There's a wound. There's blood. And I guess Van Sant's family's actually on the beach. They're watching this. So he goes to his sister. I believe her name was Louise. He grabs the dress. He rips it. He makes a tourniquet. They drag him into the Angleside Hotel, and they clear out the manager's office, and they put him on the desk. And they realize there's no way this guy is going to be able to take a bumpy car ride to a hospital. And Dr. Willis and Dr. Ness show up, and they're trying to save him. But in about 2 hours, he is bled out, and he's dead. And the first death in American history by a shark attack publicly becomes Charles Van Sant, 24 years old. There is talk about it in the media. Philadelphia papers say it's a shark. The New York Times says it's a fish attack. Now, I do have the article. I found it. It does say a possible shark in it later. But people are skeptical, and honestly, it doesn't create a lot of buzz. 5 days later in Spring Lake, which is about 50 miles away, there's a major resort, the Essex and Sussex Hotel. Glamorous, 400 guests at a time, some of the best of society. This was one of the places to be at the Jersey Shore. And there's a bellboy who's Swiss named Charles Bruder. He's 27. He's well liked. They say he's a fearless swimmer. And apparently they talked about the shark attacks with his buddy, and Bruder doesn't buy it. He said he's seen sharks in California, and they're pretty timid. They run away from us. So just splash, they'll go away. So he goes swimming with some friends, and at the time, important to note that you couldn't swim where the guests swim. You were an employee, so you have to go in a different area. We can't have employees and guests swimming together. So he's with two of his buddies, and they're swimming. And his friends tire out a little earlier than expected, and it's cold. They say that they come back and mention like the water's cold. There's the Jersey Shore breeze, if you know anything about it, catches you on the wrong day. That water is kind of unbearable. So apparently the water was about 60 degrees. That was a little too cold for them. They come out. So he's by himself, and he's a very good swimmer, and he swims beyond the ropes and the lifelines that are set up. And now he's about 130 yards out to shore. And now screaming is heard. And people realize it's him. He's screaming. Now, there's a woman watching this from the boardwalk through one of those viewfinders. She sees the shark attack him, and it attacks him twice. And she actually says it was like an airplane attacking a Zeppelin. It charged him, attacked him, bit him, most likely. The shark swam away and then turned around and boom! Charged right back at him, smashed into him. And that was the second attack. There's two lifeguards. They're not equipped for this. And this guy's 130 yards out. They can't swim this. Now, there's some kind of chatter, there's rumor. People are shouting that a red canoe has gone over because floating in the water is this red patch. So it's assumed the hull of this canoe has flipped over. So the lifeguards come out, they bring out their boat, they swim out there. And as they're getting closer, they realize there's no canoe out there. This is the blood of Charles Bruder that's floating. The lifeguards put out the oar, and he's trying to pull himself up, and he can't do it. He doesn't have the strength to do it. So they realize they have to lean over the boat and pull him in. And when they do, they're horrified to see that below the knee, there are no legs. The shark has bitten off his legs. By the time they get back to shore, he's dead in the boat. He's already gone. And that's where the media frenzy takes place. Once this story hits, and the fact that now, unlike the first one where there was gashes, now we are missing limbs. So people in the media and people in the area go wild. Here comes the reporters. Here comes the stories. Front page news all across the country. Shark attacks. New Jersey. Now, 2 are dead. Are they linked? Is it the same shark? We don't know. But people are concerned. This is now twice. 2 people have been killed on a beach within 5 days. Similar to the plot line of Jaws, business owners have meetings with local government, with state officials, trying to do anything they can to save their summer and their investment. There are millions of dollars at stake. So what do? Motorboat patrols, guns, dynamite. Get the dynamite. They're throwing dynamite and exploding dynamite in the ocean. Both of these instances, after the attack and the people were brought out of the water, the shark's not there. The shark does not stick around. The shark's gone, which is not going to be the case for our next issue. People are now see anti-shark nets, steel mesh, being put out into the ocean, saying it'll be safe in here. They can't get in. Whether they buy that or not, how safe they were, who knows? I'm sure a shark would find a way. But people are now ditching the beaches and they're heading to pools. They're heading to springs. They're heading to rivers. And they're heading to creeks, which leads us to Matawan, which is 11 miles from the ocean. So at no point did anyone think anything from the ocean is going to work its way into a creek. Matawan is a small town. It's factories. Everyone knows each other. Quiet town, peaceful town. Great place to live. Well, on July 12th, now we're 7 days out from the ocean shark attacks. A retired fishing captain named Thomas Cantrell is walking on a drawbridge. And he looks down and he sees a figure in the water, 8 to 10 feet. And he's pretty positive this is a shark. No one believes him when he comes back. He says, I just saw a shark. And they say, inland? No, you're crazy. But a few hours later, Lester Stillwell's an 11-year-old. And he's with his 4 friends. And they go in the creek every day to cool off. And these are all local boys. They are from the town. And he says he feels something like sandpaper scrap up against his leg. And it's brushed against him. And he realized there's a shark there. And the boys panic as they see Lester gets dragged underwater. And these are all boys 10, 11 years old. They come running out of the water. And they run to town. Shark, shark, shark. Now, when they get to town and they tell everybody what's going on, I'm not going to be so sure that everyone believes that there's a shark in the area. But they know there's trouble. They know Lester's in trouble. And they even kind of know right away that he's dead. So some of the older boys who knew these kids come looking, and they later say that these guys wanted to find Lester's body. They were pretty sure he was in there. They wanted to find his body. And one of them is a 24-year-old tailor named Stanley Fisher. And they're all diving in, and there's talks, Stanley did it with his friends, saying they did it. They're tired. They're getting cold. But, Lester's like, no, it's not right. We can't leave him down there. We got to keep looking. And then he dives down and he finds the body in the murky and dark water. Now, he apparently finds the body of Lester Stillwell, but the shark never left the area. So apparently as he was bringing the body up, the shark, boom, went right after Stanley. As Stanley gets dragged out of the water, the shark disappears. That's the end of the shark. But everyone's saying Stanley's thigh is stripped of about 10 pounds of flesh. Apparently he looks at his leg, and the only words he says to everyone is, oh my God. And then he doesn't look again. He's in and out of consciousness. And when the doctors get to him, and they're talking to him, and he is somewhat coherent, he says that he ripped the body of Lester from the shark's mouth, and that the shark then went after him. Everyone in the area goes down to Pondside, and they're there with guns. They're there with dynamite. They're there to kill anything in that water that may have harmed these 2 residents of this town. About a half a mile downstream on the Wyckoff Dock area is another group of boys doing the same thing. They are the Dunn boys, Michael and Joseph, and a buddy of theirs, Jerry Hurahan, and 2 other friends. And apparently they seem to hear some type of screaming. There's a lot of people gathering to the area, a half mile down, only a few hundred yards. And they start to sense that they're hearing the word shark. And apparently they look at each other, turn around, see they got to get back to the dock. And without a blink of an eye, boom, they start moving. They get to the dock. And that's when the final attack happens. Joseph Dunn is clipped from behind by a shark. Now, the questions still remain. Is it the same shark that attacked the first two victims in the ocean? Is it the same shark that attacked Lester and Stanley a half a mile downstream? Is it even a great white? There's beliefs modern to this time that great white sharks do not go in creeks. It wouldn't happen. It's a hammerhead. It's a bull shark. It's a blue shark. Definitely not a great white. Well, we're going to talk to Roger Still today, who is the descendant of the Dunn brothers and who has talked to his grandfather about this attack. What happened, what kind of shark he saw, and kind of what it did to the family dynamic after that. So we're going to welcome Roger. And that's where the story now shifts to your grandfather and your grandfather's brother,
Mm-hmm.
the Dunns.
Yeah.
And they're about a half mile up the creek. And, amazingly, I guess the way through chatter goes, now when the boys first saw the attack, they run out, they came to town, said there's a shark. Not everybody's believing it, but apparently your grandfather and brother do hear calls of a shark. They do hear someone yell shark, and they decide, okay, we're by the Wyckoff dock, I guess as it's called.
Uh-huh.
And they say it's time to get out. And that's where it was your father, or it was your grandfather, your uncle, it was another guy, Jerry, and two other kids from town that have probably lost the history of their names. But before we even talk, Roger, about what you've heard from that day, your family was from New York. So how do you know how did your family end up in Mattawan that day?
Yeah, it's funny. They were back then. They at that age, the grand folks, my grandfather, they were in upper, I guess it would be Spanish Harlem, upper New York, closer to the Bronx, but still Manhattan in the city.
Okay.
And they used to go to an aunt's house in Clifford, New Jersey, which is nearby, I assume, to the Mattawan Creek. I think it's close by. And they used to go to her house, and how they used to get to the creek, it must have been close, or there's also a train track that goes to the creek, or right there in Mattawan. And that's what they used to do. They would take the train and go to the creek and I guess go swimming. And I know on that day it was very, very hot. Like there was a heat wave. And maybe that was the only place that they knew. Maybe one of those kids who were lost to history lived around there. I don't know why they went there, but they went there. Yeah. And again, very close. It's weird how they heard the stuff and I guess we're still in the water or we're getting out. I don't know exactly how that played out.
So I've been sourcing a lot of Richard Fernicola's book, 12 Days of Terror.
Wow.
Which, if you haven't picked up, is really interesting.
Met him this summer. Yeah.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. I did.
Where did you meet him?
I went to Mattawan. Funny enough,
okay.
They invited me to come. And I think it happened the same way. I had said something on the Mattawan Creek thing. I said, oh, that's great that you have this yearly festival, I guess you even want to say. I don't know. Around they commemorate the shark attack every year. And so I said, oh, that's my uncle. And they said, would you like to be part of it? I said, well, I'd love to come and see it because I've always been meaning to. So I went down and they have, sure enough, they have a whole thing and they have a tour through all the sites and everything. And they tell the whole story. Very interesting. I'm so glad I went. Hoping next year more of my family come. But it was really, really cool. But anyway, he was there, and I met him, and he said, "Oh, I knew I was always trying to find Joseph Dunn." I said, "He was around a long time. I guess he was just hard to find. He didn't have children, so he was married. But yeah, so I met him there. So a very, very interesting, great book. You're right.
Oh, it's just amazing reading the story. How much eventually mirrors the situations in Jaws. You have the first attack with the dog. You have the town meeting saying, what the hell are we going to do? We're going to lose millions of dollars here. The boys know in the water there's trouble. And they decide to get out. So they, I guess the way he tells it in the book, they all turn around and see the dock and say, let's get the hell out of here, pretty much. And are they concerned? Are they not concerned? I mean, who really? Okay, what are the odds that it's going to be right here?
When we were told to never talk to my uncle about it.
Right.
My grandfather, he would go on because of course he wasn't,
Really?
it wasn't as
Right.
traumatic to him. But what they explained to me was my grandfather was that, and he used to speak with an Irish brogue. He was still had his Irish in him, and he would say, "Oh, it was a mighty struggle," like that. So he actually fought the it was a tug of war
Yes.
between the shark and my grandfather over my uncle, and my grandfather had the upper part and the shark had the lower part, and they went on, and thankfully my grandfather won and was able to pull him out of the shark's mouth. Which is crazy. If this
Unbelievable.
story happened today, it would really be
Oh,
amazing. It was amazing back then, but really
sure.
something else when you think about it. And it's just my grandfather. Who does that? I mean, I
I,
guess you do it with your brother, but crazy to fight off a shark.
well, yeah. They as the as Fernicola tells it, and I guess I'm sure your grandfather's told it. So your uncle Joseph, he's the youngest of the crew.
Yes, yes.
But do you know how much younger Joseph was than Michael?
I think they were 4 years apart. So at the time, I think it was 16 and 12. I think 14 and 10 or 16 and 12. That's approximate, I think.
Joseph was really still a little farther out. He was still about 10 feet from the dock.
Yeah.
And as he's getting closer, he feels a scrape by his foot.
Mm-hmm.
He looks down. There's a dark shape in the water, and he starts to see the blood. And apparently, according to this book, the rest of the journey from him, he doesn't remember anything. After that, he's in hysterics, just fighting for his life. Where now your brother or your grandfather, his brother, and I got to get Jerry's name right here. And we got Jerry Horahan, who's one of their buddies.
Wow.
They form a human chain. And they're trying to pull him out, and it's not working. And your grandfather just says, I'm going to get my brother. Your grandfather dives in to the blood pool.
Yeah.
And the shark's trying to pull your uncle out, and they're trying to pull him in. And then there's, like a movie in a sense, there's two adults that all of a sudden just happen to show up as it's happening here. So let's see who we have here. We have a guy from the Brickyard, Superintendent Robert Thress. Apparently, he helps your grandfather pull your uncle out. And then there's a Manawan resident, Jacob Lefferts, who's just fishing in the area. He comes over. He dives right in the water, and he's helping from the bottom, trying to get your grandfather out. And then like that, your uncle's pulled out, and the shark's gone.
Wow.
And the shark's gone.
I wonder if back then. Now we all know about sharks, and there's sharks everywhere and everything, and you certainly see one. I don't know if you're jumping in. Maybe back then they didn't have the fear of it so much. It's never happened. They never thought. Maybe they weren't as afraid of sharks as certainly we are now. I don't know why you would jump in that water. Well,
some of the shark experts put out paperwork that said sharks are not to be feared. This same report said, and I guess this is where the title came from. It said the jaws of a 20-foot shark couldn't even snap a human bone.
Oh boy.
Well,
little misinformation.
Absolutely. What? So your uncle gets pulled out and he gets dragged. They take him to a factory.
What?
And unlike all the other victims who were actually, so your uncle's very lucky compared to all the other victims that were attacked. They all said this person can't make the journey to the hospital, but they take him to St. Peter's Hospital and they realize he can make the journey and they save his life, fortunately, where initially the doctor on hand said, I don't think he's going to make it. There's some interesting quotes I'll read to you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is from young boys, so here's what they were saying. So apparently they find a reporter gets them near the hospital. And Joe says, or a reporter asked him, Joe, how did it feel to be bitten by a Jersey man eater? So the sensationalism was real even back then. And Joe exclaimed, I was about 10 feet from the dock ladder. I looked down, I saw something dark. I felt a tug. It was like a big pair of scissors pulling at my leg and bringing me under. I felt like as if my leg had gone. I believe it would have swallowed me.
Yeah.
Michael Dunn was saying, I heard Joe cry. I saw him go under. I rushed out to him with Jerry Hurahan and we seized him just in time, but we could feel the shark tug at him as we pulled him away and swam to the shore. Joseph explained that he felt the shark scratch his leg just prior to the actual bite. It felt as if the shark was trying to get my entire leg down its throat. Just before the automobile drove off, another reporter approached and asked him, Will you tell me your full name? And he said, I should not say it, replied the unusually polite youngster. Would you tell my mother, though? And the reporter asked, Where would you live? And Joseph said, In New York City, but I can't tell you the street. And there was one or two other reports I saw from newspapers. Now, who knows if they took that interaction, but where he was quoted as saying, Don't tell my mother I got bit by a shark,
Yes,
which
that's
is,
what we heard too. Where they got that, I don't know. That he was going to get in trouble. Don't tell my mom I'm going to get in trouble. And then there was other stories that they were going to get in trouble because they were cutting out of school. But that can't be. It's July,
no.
you
Yeah,
know,
July.
summer school, and maybe they were knuckleheads and they needed summer school.
I'm sure.
But yeah, that was a couple of. But what we've heard pretty much is from the books and a couple of things from my grandfather that he said as far as the shark and with the fight and this kind of stuff. And my uncle would never speak about it. He never wore shorts. I remember that. Never. He showed my older sister and like some of the cousins his like one time, and they explained it. It was just like no muscle. No, it was just like the bone, like a stick, just
Wow.
like just obviously covered with skin, but with nasty scars on like a stick, like a pole, which I guess was his bone. And he had a limp, a slight limp. Never again talked about it. It all started when Jaws came out again, and there was re-interest in it, and it was in the newspapers, and they mentioned his name and the only survivor, and where was he today? Da 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 da. So we got him again in it, and my mother would always say, "Don't ask him, don't ask him, don't ask him." So I guess it was troubling for him his whole life. The weird thing is that both he and my grandfather, in their lives later on, bought houses on a creek. Isn't that unbelievable? And I just realized that this summer when I was in Mattawan and they were asking me about them, and I was starting to, and I said, I just realized they bought how who would do that? But
That's
they
crazy.
did, yeah, yeah. But he was my uncle. He was a very distinguished man. He always I remember him in nice suits, and he used to wear a bow tie. He was married to my aunt Eleanor, a very small woman. He was well to do. He was big in the insurance business.
Okay.
Very tall, big shock of white hair, very very kind. Um, and that was it really. And again, he never wanted to talk about it. My uncle, my grandfather would, but not Uncle Joe.
Now, so unlike the other so he did not lose his leg.
No,
He
he
just had a
didn't.
badly damaged, and so he was able to walk, and he was
Yes, he was able to walk. I think it was damaged from the calf up, so almost the whole leg. And that's maybe why the limp. Maybe he couldn't move his knee and bend it. That's kind of what I'm thinking. That's why he had the limp, like no mobility, but not enough where he could sit down, but moved slowly. But then again, when I was aware of him, he was older. He was an older guy. I
sure.
don't remember him young, of course, but he moved slowly, but was perfectly normal life. I don't remember him with a cane, but the limp certainly. And the story we heard, basically what you just said, exactly like that. And then this summer, also, I remember telling the story because there was discrepancy on whether it was a bull shark or a great white shark. And this is what
Absolutely.
I was told by my grandfather. And they were saying, what kind of, and he said exactly this. It was just like the one in the movie Jaws.
Wow.
So, I mean, that could be in hindsight, the movie Jaws is out, or,
Sure.
when 1916 you're fighting off a shark, you don't know what it even is
Right.
or whatever. But that's what he said. It was like a great white shark. So, that's pretty amazing. And the guys in Manawan told me that it wasn't far fetched for, they say a bull shark because we all know that they go in rivers, but the
Yep.
white shark would not have been out of place there either, because they said back then the tidal was different. The tidal basin, and it was full of salt. The marsh was all salt water, and there was something else. The temperature of that year, where it wouldn't be unheard of for a great white shark to be in there. So, I mean, that's
You
up to
know,
interpretation and history, I guess.
sure. And I think that was the thing that first grabbed me, because I've seen over the years people like, ah, it's the story's made up. It was dramatized to be a great white. And
Mhm.
then you turned around and said, no, my grandfather looked it right in the face
That's
and
what he
said,
said, and he did. He had he was closest to the shark when the shark had, his brother in his mouth, right there, and he said it was just like the one from Jaws. So
unbelievable.
I mean, I would believe that. And then when the
Sure.
people from Mattawan said that through their investigations, they think because of the temperature and the saline in the water, saline, and so they said it's not out of the question. And they also caught a great white there that had human remains in it. But or so, I mean, do you have two sharks eating people at the same time? I don't know. There's evidence to say it's the great white more so than the other way, I would think.
I agree.
Witness
I
said it
agree.
was the one in Jaws, and you had a great white caught with human remains. That's pretty, pretty telling.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Certainly another person who I think his handle on YouTube is Delaware History. I don't know if you're aware of this. He made it a mission to find your uncle. I don't know if you're aware of
I
him.
think so. And is it on YouTube as well?
Yes, he made a short document, and it was kind of like Joseph Dunn, the man who was erased from history. No one can find it. He becomes this mythical. Now with it, all of his relatives like, no, he lived till I think 82, 83.
I watched that. I found it on YouTube and I watched it, and I looked in the comments, and I was going to say, "Hey, I'm his nephew," but my cousin, his niece, had already
Beat you to
beaten
it,
to it. Yeah.
right?
She said, "Oh no," and she explained his history. He lived a long life, named names, married to Eleanor, lived in Rockville Center, Long Island, was in real estate, had a long life, was with the family. My mother and all her siblings used to go over to their house, and then later on we did. I have vivid memories of him, but yeah, he lived a long. As a matter of fact, he's buried in St. Charles Cemetery in Farmingdale, New York, with the other Dunns
Okay.
there. But he's not. His name is not on the headstones, which is another intriguing part. So maybe that had something to do with they couldn't find him.
Well, they say, well, that's the story. I guess he's there, but for some reason,
Yeah.
there's other John
There's other
tombstones,
Dunns
but
there. Yes,
his is blank.
his
His is
brother might
blank.
be, but no, he lived a long, long life.
And
Yeah,
he was married, you said.
and he was married to Eleanor, who predeceased him by a few years. They lived on Long Island the whole time. The whole time. He wasn't hard to find, I wouldn't think, but I guess maybe back then it's
Right.
now the internet. You can find everybody anywhere, anytime.
It's not as easy as it is now, throwing
Oh,
it in Google and people coming up. You're going through phone books. You're going through the yellow
yeah.
pages looking for
Right.
people.
You're at the library and you're looking at
Right.
books and hoping something will pop. But now, yeah, you can find anybody.
Now,
Wow.
do you still have cousins that are Duns? Do you
I
still
do.
have
Oh, yeah.
Dun?
Yes, absolutely. All over Long Island. Yeah. And
Right.
upstate New York. Yeah. I just spoke to my cousin, Jimmy Dunn, upstate New York. And Michael Dunn was named after my grandfather, my other cousin, John Dunn. I mean, yeah, they're there. Maybe that's it. I think all three of those Dunns live upstate. And the other Dunns who were girls, my cousins, will have married names, and
Right.
so maybe that was harder. Yeah, and then the other Dunns have. We had five Dunn girls in the family, so they married. Like my last name isn't Dunn; it's Still. So my
Right.
mother was Dunn, and my aunts were all Dunns, but they had married. So that we had a reunion on the 100th anniversary of the attacks on Long Island. We all got together, all the Dunns, and we had a thing. So it's in our history, it's our lore, and I don't know, celebrates the right word, but
Right.
we certainly get together, and a part of every time Shark Week is there, they'll play a story about the Matawan Creek.
Have you ever seen the mural on the Matawan Creek of the shark under that bridge? Man,
Wonderful. Wow.
that's
Thank kind of
creepy.
kind of creepy and scary, I know.
Yeah.
Seems true to life for me.
Absolutely. How old are you when Jaws comes out?
I think I was teenager, young teenager, maybe around there. Yeah. And got into the movie without really knowing about the story.
Okay, I was going to ask, did you
Yeah.
guys know before the movie came
Not
out?
really. No, it only became in in my conscience. So maybe my older sisters and my cousins, older ones, knew, but it probably wasn't as big as once Jaws blew up.
Right.
Then it became a whole different thing. But yeah, and I remember Jaws came out, and then all the articles in the newspaper about Manawan Creek, and then reading Joseph Dunn over and over again. I said, wow. And then talking to my parents about it, and then my grandfather, it really took off. And then now in the internet days and everything on YouTube,
Oh
it's
yeah.
Shark Week. It's really, really taken off. And Manawan Creek doing their yearly pilgrimage and tours. They're trying to keep it alive, and greatly so because it's their history. And why not? Why not make
Absolutely.
it something and remember the victims especially, and do something for the town?
How difficult was it as a 15-year-old kid not to ask your uncle who you've
Oh,
known? How hard is that not to say,
yeah.
What happened?"
So very much because Jaws was, I mean, we loved the movie. I
Of
love
course.
Jaws. And we all loved Jaws. And then to make it a little bit personal, where they actually even mentioned the shark attacks in Jaws, I think most of my family really got involved. Shark Week is like a holiday for us. You know, we
Sure, sure, of course.
really embrace it because it's a fascinating subject, regardless of whether you have a personal thing to it, which we do.
Do you think it impacted your uncle's life? Do you think your uncle never thought about it, or do you think he always thought about it? What do you think?
Great question. And think I think he thought about it. I would think he it was part of him because we were told never to ask him. So obviously, I think from his direct nieces, my mother and my aunts, and obviously it was a thing. Maybe he didn't want to relive it
Right.
because we were told not to ask him about it. So I think it did put a little, a thought in his mind where he probably had to think about it a lot. I would guess, yeah. Something, yeah. And it was again very um traumatic for him, I would think. And every day with his limp, he's reminded of it, and he puts on
Right.
his socks. He's got to see that. So I'll bet it was in his conscience quite a bit. Yeah.
Do you remember him swimming? Did he ever swim after that?
No, I never ever remember him swimming. And it's funny you say that. We would go to my grandparents' house on the creek on Long Island, and there was a pool at my cousin's house, and everybody was always in the pool. It was the place where we'd go for summers on
Right.
the creek with a swimming pool, and never ever there or anywhere else did I see him with shorts on or go swimming ever.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think one of you, maybe your cousin, mentioned one time they saw his calf and they saw how scarred it was.
Yes, very much so. Yeah. From like the upper part of his leg all the way down was scarred and thin, where you could tell the meat was missing, the muscle was missing, and definitely a pronounced limp. And so, yeah, I think it was some severe damage. It's too bad he's not around now because I think we would all really then start asking him about it.
Oh yeah.
And it's a shame we didn't really get a chance to, because I'm sure he could have really filled in a lot of blanks and been more specific on it. And my grandfather, to a certain degree, but really both of them, it was kind of, I guess, with him, a taboo subject.
Sure.
And that's too bad because a lot could have been found. Why did you go in? Did you hear anything? Or did you see Lester? Did you see any of that stuff happening? What exactly? And maybe how large was the shark?
Right.
These kind of things.
I'm curious, did they know each other? I'm curious of that because, but these towns, there's 2,000, 3,000 people in these, that
Mhm.
spread out.
Yeah.
Young kids find each other. It's funny
Sure.
now as being a parent of kids now, you hear like kids were playing a half a mile away. Like to now, that's like 5 countries away,
You wouldn't even think about it. No
But
way.
a
Yeah.
100 years ago, kids wandering ahead, that's nothing. That's
Swimming up the creek, down the creek, in the pond, at the bay.
Yep.
Yeah, I bet you're right. Yeah.
So I always wondered, maybe
like you, so many questions. I mean, I don't even know. I didn't know the part where the reason why they were there. I assumed they lived over there, and then to find out they never did, and that they came to an aunt's house. I don't even know who this aunt is. I
Oh,
don't know.
really?
And that they would go, and I think it's pretty far from Upper Manhattan
Oh, yeah.
to Mattawan and Clifford and Raritan Bay, and that's not. I can't imagine that's an easy ride. So they must have stayed some length of time.
Absolutely.
I think it was the train. I think I heard that took a train down again, which wouldn't have been that quick really back then either.
One of the boys in the book says that the Matawan Creek was thick and dark. And it still kind of looks that way, even when
Yes,
you
yeah,
know, just thick and dark. So that's even more of just a frightening scenario over. You look down and you can't even see what you're looking at, and
why
the
would that be?
thickness.
The creek goes up further towards the bay. Wouldn't you go? But man, it was a hot spot, but thick and scary.
You know, who knows how news traveled? And I wonder if your relatives even were aware of an attack a week earlier, if they even cared, if an
Hmm.
aunt had said, just go down by the creek, nothing's going to be down there, you know, or if it wasn't even an issue, if it,
Yeah,
or
isn't
maybe they were there all the time. They could have been there all the time. They
it
could have,
could?
you know,
I don't know. They may have gone every summer. For
right,
all we know, it might have been like I said. I just found this out. I didn't know they had an aunt in Clifford. It makes sense that they would go there for like some period of time. To me,
right,
not just. I can't imagine a day. I would
right.
imagine them staying there. I'm gonna. That's a question I have. I'll talk to my other cousins to see if they know any more info on that. But I would imagine that was a place to go.
Yeah, you know, so I'm thinking this was not their first rodeo in this lake,
No,
you know,
that's very
and
interesting. You're probably 100% correct. I would love to find that information out. Yeah, how often did they go? Did they just dodge a bullet another time? Were they
right.
were they there the day before? Very very interesting.
Do you think does the family look at your grandfather as a hero for diving back in
Yeah,
for
yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, they think, wow. In these days now, like I said, to dive in the water with a shark is just
oh,
crazy because we know so much more about sharks, and we
right.
know that they're not man eaters. But to go in to the water when one is eating is pretty amazing.
Man, looking in the dark eyes of that shark, your grandfather, and even the book even says in seconds. The boys had seconds, and they came up with a plan. We're going to make a chain, and we're going to pull Joe out. And then when that didn't work, like that's so impressive by young people who've never. This is unheard of in the
No,
United States. This is unheard of.
the most traumatic thing that happened to them in their lives up to that point, certainly, and to come
Absolutely.
and so yes, we do think of him as that when we think of it. So that's pretty amazing to do something
Yep.
like that, and that's why the story sticks with us because we have a hero, who's your grandfather. We have
It's
one
great.
survivor, which is amazing. I'm sad for the others.
Yep.
But to say, hey, my uncle was the only one who survived, and my father was the one involved with others in saving him. Yeah, that's pretty hero stuff.
Tell me about your grandfather.
Did well. I don't know how he did well because he had 8 kids. They had 8 kids.
Oh my lord, Mike.
And
Oh my
then,
lord.
yeah, which is crazy. They had 8 kids and lived in a small apartment in Astoria, Queens. And my family, we're 7, and we live in the same apartment.
Oh my
So,
god.
yeah. But so there's your hero.
Right. Well, if you're crazy enough to jump in and face a shark, I guess 8 kids is the
Did a
next
little,
challenge.
that's
Oh
no,
my lord.
but
When did your
yeah,
grandfather pass away?
he passed away in the late 70s.
Oh, so he
70,
passed before.
yeah, he went right before Uncle Joe, not too far apart, 78, 79, even in and around that time. Few years after, I believe they were the only children, 2 brothers in
Right.
that family.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember your grandfather's reaction to Jaws?
I remember it being not his reaction, but I remember it being a lot to do. It was very big, and our family was going. And I remember my sister took me, and you got to go see Jaws. And my mother even went, which is a surprise.
Right, right.
Everybody was well aware, and it was like a story. Like, they mentioned New Jersey, do you know they mentioned the, and we were, wow. And then the news reports came out, but we all embraced it or wanted to see it. And, you'd ask every family member, and most of them would say, oh, yeah, that's our favorite movie.
Sure, of course, of course. Mine too. It's my it
Yeah,
is my it is
great,
my favorite movie. So
great. Yeah, it's the
so
one.
do you think your grandfather went to the movies to see it, and do you think your uncle went to the movies to see it?
That's another great question. Boy, I wish I would have asked those. I would bet. Hmm. Oh, I couldn't answer. That's really
Right.
what I would think my grandfather would, but not my uncle.
I
I
would bet the same. I would
think.
bet the same.
Yeah, I remember my grandfather having a great sense of humor too. So
Great.
hey, we lived, hey, it's fine.
Sure.
Let's go watch this movie. So, but I bet he would not so much the uncle, and I keep saying that because of what my mother told us. Don't
Sure.
ask him.
Right.
So I think maybe it did leave a mark on him. So that's
Roger,
why.
tell me a little bit about yourself. I see in your Facebook you're on boats. You like to ride
Well,
boats.
it's funny we're talking about the subject. So I've been going the last few years to Cape Cod, and I go on their shark excursions. They have
Okay.
a big. That's another show for you. This is, I guess, in Cape Cod in the last 20 years, great whites have made quite a rebound because
Really?
the seal populations have made an incredible rebound in Cape Cod. Why Cape Cod? But okay, hey, better than the South Shore of Long Island where I am.
Absolutely.
I don't want to
Yeah,
be another.
you guys' family lived it already. Yeah.
But up in Cape Cod, and so I've been going the last few years on these great white excursions because they're all over the island. Well,
Right.
you couldn't tell me because every time I've gone, we haven't seen one.
Oh
And the next day
gosh.
I hear, oh, there was five here, and then it was so, but I just keep missing them. But I'm going to continue going until I see them. So I am.
You know,
I guess I'm a good guy for this podcast because I love the great white sharks. I want to go and see one. That's a bucket list thing. And it has to do with the story we've been talking about, maybe, but I find them fascinating.
well, I don't know if I want to come face to face with either one of them.
I know. I don't know how when I see one, I might be, this was not a good idea.
Right, right. Well, I think it's great, and I love for the record that your grandfather said it was a great white shark that I
Yeah.
absolutely looked in the eyes of and
Yeah.
rescued his kid brother from, which is just a great story. And
Great
you
story.
know what? It's obviously a terrible tale, but the
Mhm.
fact that something 100 years ago has kept your family bonded for a purpose to get together. It's so lost in American culture now, though, of just getting the big family together. I think it's great, and
Mhm.
I wish your family all the best, and I hope we keep unfolding and finding more answers. And thank you so much for coming on. I
My
really
pleasure.
appreciate it.
Great podcast. I look forward to seeing it and the rest of your stuff too. I'll keep an eye on it. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thanks, Roger. Have a
Yeah.
great day. Give your best to the
You
family. Thank you so
you as
much.
well. Thank you. Take care now.
Bye now.
Bye.
Well, folks, that's Roger Still, the descendant of James and Michael Dunn, who were the last leg of the shark attack in 1916, which led us to a Jaws novel, which kind of brought it all back up into American society. Now, for a little while in 1916, we're in the middle of World War One. Pancho Villa. There was a few weeks where this attack dominated the headlines of media. This was the topic. This was the sensation. And it just goes to show you that events like this, the people do get enthralled by them. After these events went down, you have guns, you have dynamite. People are on high alert. They are hunting. They are throwing explosives into water. They are shooting every shark. They are capturing every shark they can find. That's bull sharks. That's blue sharks. That's great white sharks. Did they catch the shark that killed some of these swimmers or attacked the Dunn brothers? Can't answer you that question. No one knows. But there is in Raritan Bay a fisherman who catches about an 8 to 10 foot great white shark that apparently is found with human flesh remains in its belly. Was that the shark that killed Lester Stillwell and Stanley Fisher? I don't know. Is it the shark that attacked Michael and Joseph Dunn? I don't know. But there was confirmed human flesh in its belly when it was caught. Who knows if it was feeding on a corpse? Who knows if it was feeding on something else? Who knows if that report was even accurate? Was it told to sensationalize the story? The shark did not attack again, or there were no confirmed attacks after there was a survivor. Coincidental? I don't know. Adds to the allure of it. So why the shark attacks? Why no attacks for years, and now all of a sudden we get 5 attacks within a 12-week period? Okay, all kinds of theories on that. For number one, we were in a record heat wave. So people were flocking to the ocean, to the water, to pools, to fountains even, to cool off. And there's reports some of these people were very good swimmers, trained swimmers, but I don't think most people were swimming. If you see some of the old footage, people were just jumping up and down. They were splashing around. That does draw a distressed fish to a shark. There's other theories. Sea battles in Europe, and that it was driving sharks west from the naval battles that were occurring from the Great War. Gulf Stream changes, some scientists believe. He had also people back to the war comment that over 15,000 people had capsized from these naval battles, and maybe the sharks began getting used to eating human flesh. And frankly, when sharks are curious, they bite. So what happens after the manhunt and motor patrols and the mass hysteria? It does not slow down the public's craving to be on the beach and be in the water and cool off. New Jersey resorts were here to stay, and that did not stop. So attacks, they don't happen. They don't happen until 1960. 1960 in Seagirt, New Jersey, where people had long forgotten about the 1916 attacks. A man named Jonathan Broder, and he lost his leg. And that was the first attack since the 1916 attacks. And then after that, New Jersey did not really see its share of attacks. It took until 2023, where a 15-year-old swimmer in Stone Harbor had her foot bitten. And she had stitches. Fortunately, to my knowledge, I don't think she lost her foot. Topic of, was it a great white? Was it a bull shark? At the time, there was, well, great white's not going to hover around the Jersey coast like that. He's not going to go in inland. There's some beliefs that that's not true, and that the Jersey shore and the Eastern Atlantic, or the Northern Atlantic, is a breeding ground for young, juvenile sharks, as they call them, smaller, 8 to 10 feet sharks. You know, in Jaws, the shark is positioned as a 25-footer. A lot of the studies I see, you're not going to get a shark really longer than 20 feet, and that's a rarity. And is that the size shark that attacked these boys? No, probably not. Somewhere between 8 to 10 feet. But coming from Michael Dunn, it was a great white shark. Forever in the lore of the Jersey shorefront will be these shark attacks that are over 100 years old, that started creating the myths and the fears of sharks. Funny thing is, the fear from the book and the movie certainly resulted in a lot more people being afraid of sharks than actual shark attacks, because they are rare. I think I saw you have 1 in 12 million chance of being attacked by a shark, but 1 in 80,000 of being struck by lightning. So that's it. Wrapping up from Northern Jersey. Nice and safe up here. But every summer, us Bennies go down there, and we keep that Southern Jersey economy alive with the lore of what lurks in the ocean. So special thanks to Roger Still for coming on, and all the descendants of the Dunn family. Thank you so much. Definitely want to give a shout out to Richard Fernicola and his book, 12 Days of Terror. It's a great read. Pick it up. some great documentaries out there. And there's that Facebook page, Delaware Historian, who talks about Joseph Dunn and his quest. So if you're as interested in the story as I am, or you're more interested, definitely check out those pieces of media. They're fun things. Well, is it safe to go back in the podcasting realm? Let's find out next week. So thanks for joining us. And to quote Chief Brody, if you come face to face with a great white, you tell him, smile, you son of a...
Smile, you son of a...